Hi, and welcome to Missouri Athletic Club Connections, a podcast highlighting Missouri's only premier athletic club. The MAC is recognized as the foremost private club in St. Louis, known for attracting exceptional people and enriching lives for generations. I'm Membership Director Rodney Stoyer, and in honor of the club's 120th anniversary, I have the honor of discussing the history of the Board of Governors elections with Peter Dunn ahead of this year's election. Thanks for being here, past Governor Dunn.
Thanks, Rodney.
And let's just get right into this. Can you start by telling our listeners what your role has been with past MAC elections and why we chose you to be here?
Sure. Well, I've been a member for a good long time, longer than comfort allows me to discuss here in public. But for the first dozen or so years of my membership in the club, I really didn't have all that much to do with club operations or management or anything. But after that time, and for the last dozen years or so, I have been involved in the election, and it started with my gradual interest and then participation in the election as a candidate. Yeah. And I ran for the Board of Governors and was elected. And I served on the board for the 3 years that the board term encompasses. And then after that, and this is inevitable, I think, once you've been on the board, you get involved with the election in assisting other people to get elected to the board. And then after a couple years of that, I was approached by then President John Bew to ask whether or not I'd be interested in participating in the election as a member of the Inspection and Policing Committee. And so I joined that committee, and for the last few years, I've been ahead of the Inspection and Policing Committee that helps administer the election.
Sure. Great. Well, wonderful history, and thank you for that history lesson. And speaking of the history, we'll talk a little bit about the history of the club. I'm going to share some quotes with you that you may not have ever heard before, but these are pulled from past Cherry Diamond articles. So here's some really interesting things. The first one is from March 17th, 1909. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but guarding the ballot box and counting the ballots as they were deposited by each individual that escaped alive from the cordon of enthusiasts working for their particular candidates. This is from 1909, they were saying that. Then later in the night, each successful candidate named stepped up onto the stage and amidst cheers made a speech with the usual promises and enthusiasm of newly elected statesmen. So those are both from 1909. Still ring true today, probably, right?
Yeah, well, that speaks to the enthusiasm of the Gauntlet, which is still an MAC tradition, and in my view, a great one. Now, today, the newly elected governors, we dispense with the speech, okay?
Wisely so.
We don't ask the newly elected governors to give a speech after the election, but of course, the governor candidates do give speeches in the lead up to the election. So there's certainly an opportunity for both the prospective governors to be heard and for the electorate, such as it is, to hear from them.
Right. Well, here, speaking of the Gauntlet, here's another specific one for you from 1965. Election Day traditionally includes the Gauntlet that funnels members through a corridor lined with handshakes, campaign promises, and pleas for votes. After the election, the evening features dinner and lively entertainment. So, again, more things that still happen today.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the entertainment piece.
Well,
that
whether it's entertaining or not.
Right.
So the Gauntlet, again, is a great tradition. And of course, it has gauntlets have their history in medieval times, where a person going through a gauntlet is subjected to a challenge, a test, a trial, and often it involves corporal punishment. Okay,
we've dispensed with that,
and so most of that is gone here at the MAC. But it is an opportunity for the supporters of each of the individual candidates to engage with the voters immediately before they're going to cast their votes. And so it really is a unique and great thing to promote interest in and excitement about the upcoming election.
Couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree. So here's the first real question I've got for you. You mentioned the titles you've held. We talked a lot about the procedural things. This seems like a very, for our listeners, for the general members of the club, this really seems like a serious, regimented process. Can you go over a few of the steps? Because there are still some very serious steps today, right?
Sure. Prospective candidates have to make their interest in running for the board known, and that comes mostly through the nominating committee. So a group of former MAC presidents and other people who've had leadership positions among the members in the club will actively recruit club members who have either shown an interest or should show an interest, frankly, in club operations and club governance. And so once a person is nominated or decides to join the election as a candidate, there's a series of procedures that happen that allow that person to get their name on the ballot, to get their thoughts and their ideas about what they would do if they were elected governor out there in front of the members, so the members have an informed, choice about the options they have among and between the various candidates.
Yeah. And again, all that still happens today, which I like. So we're going to talk real quickly because we talked about this before the camera started. Let's first talk about the changes because, not all of them are positive. So what have you seen change thanks to technology?
Yeah, well, the big change, like we mentioned as we were getting started, is the availability of electronic voting, okay? Mm-hmm. And that has been great from the perspective of increasing participation in the election. More people are voting now than ever before because it's made so easy for them. All they have to do is get online. Now, in fairness, some of our members aren't comfortable getting online, which is hard to believe in 2023 that anybody would not have that capacity. But if you're my age or older, it's very easy to understand. You really need a 15-year-old or someone to explain the way the internet works, for example. But so because you can get online and vote, you can cast a ballot and participate in the election before the actual election date. The corresponding, result, and I don't know if it's an unintended consequence or not, is that a person can vote and therefore doesn't have to come downtown for the actual election night. And you mentioned developments that aren't good. That's sort of one of those because election night at the MAC is a great night. It's just an exciting time, a fun time. The membership is engaged and excited, and the candidates are nervous, and the atmosphere in the club is very, very exciting, and so it's a fun time. And then there's the free dinner, and I use the word free, advisedly, but there's the dinner, and then the selection, the actual announcement of the 5 people who have succeeded for election to the board. So that's an exciting moment, exciting for the people who are elected, and very, very honest, very disappointing for the ones who have striven for election and then not succeeded. But even for them, it's a great opportunity to meet more members, to become known at the club, to participate in club activities. And many, as you know, many failed candidates, if at first, you don't succeed, try again and then get elected the second time. In fact, I've seen it happen, and you have too, that a failed candidate from a year will lead the ballot the second year. Yeah. So it's really great. And so even if you don't prevail the first time you're on the ballot. People who members who love the MAC and are happy about their membership and excited and participate in club events, they're going to keep at it, and that's great.
Agreed. And I think most of the reason for that is obviously, them just not being known widely enough. They may be known in certain circles, and
right.
That's an okay thing. There's nothing wrong with
right.
it. You're getting to be known more and more, and
right. And as you know, there are various constituencies within the club
sure.
that have where each group. People may be well known, and probably the biggest one numerically are the basketball players. The basketball players all know one another, and if a basketball player is up for a nomination and seeking election to the board, it's very common that other basketball players will support that person. The Apollos, for many years, was an organization that from which candidates emerged. And even though the Apollos are not as numerically great in number than in prior years, I think support of the Apollos is also important. But there's other groups that is the wellspring for potential candidates, and so you will find a potential candidate will do things like join the book club, work out at the MAC West, where so many
sure.
people are now focusing their club participation, or join the basketball league, just because they think maybe it'll help them get elected.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing to remember is, like you mentioned, let's just use basketball, for example. I want to say we probably had 2 players in this past election from last year, but always remember that the members of the club are voting on 5.
Right.
So even if they think, well, gosh, I'm going to, I know my basketball buddy, I'm going to vote for my basketball buddy, they still have to vote for 4 more people.
Right.
So it's important for all of the candidates to be as well known as possible, right?
Well, it's funny you should mention that because for many years I was always of the private opinion that lawyers were at something of a disadvantage at MAC election, because for a development that I know will shock you and shock our audience, for some reason there's a feeling among the membership that too many lawyers on the Board of Governors is a bad thing. And why anyone could possibly think
right.
that, I have no idea. But so it's very difficult for more than 2 lawyers to get elected. 2 lawyers, fine. More than 2, I'm just going to say that doesn't happen.
It shifts the balance of power.
Well, and of course, I'm convinced the reason for that obviously is envy. Okay, everybody likes to make fun of lawyers until you need one.
Right.
Okay,
Good point.
Then there's nothing funny about it.
Right. I like that a lot. Well, one thing I in particular have noticed over the years, and I want to see your opinion on this, is one of the great things to see is the larger numbers of younger members coming downtown. And keep in mind that those are also the most likely to be just sitting at home voting on their phone. So
yeah.
What are you seeing with that? Are younger members showing up for the election?
Well, there are probably other possible podcast guests you could have that are in a better position to be to talk about what it's like to be a younger member, because I haven't fit that definition for a long, long time. But it's great, and what everybody recognizes is that the greater number of younger members that we have, the better the future looks for the club, and so it's really, really gratifying that groups like the Associates and other groups, including the Basketball League, that are attractive to younger members, have succeeded so much that we have been really, really lucky to have so many young members joining the club and not just becoming members, but participating in the club. And that's what
True.
It's about.
True. Yeah, I need to echo that by saying, our Associates Council, the events that they put on, they're not just here in name only, hey, I'm glad I joined the MAC.
Right,
They
like
really
I
want
was
to be a
for
part.
so many years when I first joined.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, quick question here. Any behind-the-scenes tidbits, anything you would want to share that might be interesting, or things that go on outside of the Gauntlet?
Okay. Well, the election is a fun and funny process because one of the things that is uh, um, important to a prospective candidate is the selection of a campaign manager, okay?
Yeah, true.
And the campaign managers, there's not a small ego person among them, okay? They all think very highly of themselves, okay? And certain ones come to mind, and I won't mention any names, but Gary Sextro, for example, comes to mind as a person who proudly would say, until recently, that he had never had a candidate fail to get elected that he supported, as if his reflected glory meant everything in terms of the possibility of getting elected. But the bottom line is that your campaign manager will guide you in the election process, help you along the way, be with you. For example, we just had Good Fellowship Day. That's always sort of been a kickoff to the election season, and so your campaign manager will be with you, introduce you around to the different people who are here, and that's an interesting part of the election process. You know, behind the scenes, one of the things that inspection and policing does is making sure that the election is fair, keeping it fair, and making sure that the candidates understand, you know, what they can and cannot do.
Yeah, including, if I'm correct, and this is, I know, enough to be dangerous here, but we even swear in the people, correct?
That's
that
correct.
the counting. I mean, it's
That's
serious.
correct. And the bylaws and the guidelines for elections have, you know, rather strict rules about what a person can and can't do. And again, in this internet age, we have to monitor and limit the amount of reach out or outreach that a candidate can engage in online.
Yeah.
You know, there's no candidate websites, there's no T-shirts, there's no hats, all the things that maybe you'd think somebody, and we've heard it all, people want to do to try to enhance their election prospects, but we don't allow any of that.
Right.
And so just that the whole idea of that is to keep the playing field level and to make sure that the focus is on the personal contacts. That's why, for example, a candidate can contact anybody in the club. You can send them an email. You can call them on the telephone. But supporters can only contact people they know, that they know personally.
Yeah, I didn't know.
And so the candidate is encouraged to go through, you know, the book. And I remember the year I ran, I went through the book and I called every past president, every past governor. And then I went and called every lawyer, thinking if the lawyers don't support each other, who is going to support us? And then I called everybody that worked downtown. And I swear, I still have my book where I X'd out the names of all the people I called. And it's a lot. Now, the campaign and the election is different. Talk about those quotes from the old days. In the old days, the campaign began in January, okay, and the election isn't until May. And in theory, when the club had a few more members then than it did now, a candidate would be calling thousands of people. Today, the actual electioneering takes place in a 2-week period, so the time is limited in how much time you can spend to it, but that really means that the candidate has to be diligent and active during that period of time to contact as many people as they can.
Right. You know, and we like to say things all the time about how, matter of fact, I specifically mention this when we do our new member orientations about how we do respect our board members. They do put in a lot of work. And there's a clear example of where it starts as a candidate. You know, you're putting in a lot of work, time, and energy, and you may or may not even be elected to the board.
Well, you get you reap what you sow, get what you pay for,
Sure.
et cetera. And I think respectfully, for example, I recall when election season begins, it begins at 12:01 a.m. on a Sunday night. And I remember at 12:01 a.m., I was going through the list of past presidents and calling every one of them. Now, the idea is you call them at work and you leave them a voicemail message. Hey, it's election season, just calling. I'm number 5 on the ballot or whatever it is. But when you're calling 50 or so past presidents, you reach a few of them at 12:30 at night, and that's when you say you're calling for somebody else. That's how you handle that one.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's one thing you said I want to go back to real quickly because I think in this anniversary year of the club, talking about what makes the MAC special, you specifically mentioned at Good Fellowship Day, for example. So somebody's going to be a campaign manager, someone on the campaign is going to be making introductions. But that's kind of what the MAC is all about every day, right? I mean, if a young lawyer is coming into the club and you might introduce them to somebody at a different firm. And
right.
Things like that.
It's the personal connections, honestly, that make the MAC so rewarding. And I honestly, personally, myself didn't appreciate that when I was a newer member, and it's only in later years that I took advantage of the opportunity to make new friends. My wife tells me it's hard to make new friends at our age, and I said, "Speak for yourself, honey. I have no problem making new friends." I'm only kidding, of course, when I say that, honey, in case you're listening, which I'm sure you're not. But anyway, the whole idea, the whole opportunity, and I have made so many people. I have met so many people that have become friends of mine through these different clubs within a club, not just the formal clubs, but the basketball group, the Apollos, and others. That's been by far and away the most rewarding part of it.
Wonderful. That ties in nicely. Well, any last things you want to share about the MAC's election process?
Well, it's a great thing, and if you have any interest whatsoever in getting involved in the club, it's really important. The general manager, operates the club, handles the day-to-day operations of the club, but the direction of the club, important decisions that get made on behalf of the club and on behalf of the members, those come from the Board of Governors, and you serve for 3 years. It's an evolving process. You serve a year. Your second year, you're eligible to be elected to the presidency. And then your third year, you're an officer in charge of a certain section of the board, whether it's treasurer, president, treasurer, secretary, and that kind of defines your obligations and responsibilities your third year. But all that, it builds up to a point where everybody on the board, their participation is important, and you get out of it exactly what you put into it. And the more that you're involved, the more that you're engaged. And the club depends on that. The financial area, the club needs people who are well-versed in that part of professionals. The legal area is important, business savvy, marketing, all the skills and talents that the different board members bring to their lives, to their businesses, all find their expression in their board service. And so that's a great thing, and it really is kind of the sum of the parts is greater than the individual involved.
Wonderful. Well, as a reminder, Thursday, May 4th, that is the day this year. So this podcast will most likely be out there in advance. So please mark your calendars for Thursday, May 4th for another amazing, wonderful year of election night at the MAC. Governor Dunn, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. Really learned a lot of inside things behind the election process. But to learn more, you can learn more about the election and the 125th anniversary of the club. Just visit the website at mac-stl.org.
Thanks, Rodney. Great
Governor,
to be here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.